International Women's Day, a day to honor achievements by women all around the world. But for women in Ukraine, it's another day of grinding war as Ukrainian forces try to fend off Russian troops in the pivotal eastern city of Bakhmut. Ukrainian women have been killed in the year-long war since Russia invaded. They've been wounded, they've lost their loved ones, their homes, and their hopes for a secure future. Ukrainian President Zelensky honored the women who have given their lives for the country and had this message for the Ukrainian people.
Ukrainian men and women, today is International Women's Day, a day of the fight for women's rights. Each year, I thank my mother. I call her to thank her that there has always been respect in my family. I thank my wife that we love each other and that we have beautiful children. I thank women who work with me. It is very important that we are equal colleagues.
Well, time now for the exchange, and joining me is Inna Sovsan. She's a member of Ukraine's parliament and served as Ukraine's Deputy Minister of Education and Science from 2014 to 2016. A pleasure to have you on the show, and happy International Women's Day. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for having me, and same to you and all our viewers.
So we obviously have been following the battle for Bakhmut for many weeks now. Ukraine obviously doing all it can to defend that city because the fear is that Russia, should it take that city, will have an open road to take larger industrial cities like Kramatorsk and Sloviansk. What can you tell us about the battle on the front lines there?
Well, the situation in Bakhmut is indeed very tense and very difficult because Russians basically put all the forces that they could dispense of into that very small town. Why it is so important? Because yes, they believe that once they take over Bakhmut, they would be able to approach big industrial zones in Kramatorsk, where people are still living, families are still living, and that is what Russians want to get access to. Because once they get there, they would basically be able to claim that absolute majority of Donetsk and Luhansk region, so the whole Donbass altogether, is under their control. And potentially for them, that would be at least one way to claim some sort of victory within this whole year of a full-scale invasion, where they don't really have a victory to report to their own people. That is why this Battle of Bakhmut became so intensely important for them. But then there is also a kind of internal political dimension to that, because the major force on the Russian side fighting is the so-called Wagner Group, which is a private military company, which is using very difficult methods of warfare. They basically don't care about the number of losses. They have lost thousands of people in that small town, but they don't care about that. They just need to show results because the leader of the group, Mr. Prigozhin, he wants to show that he can be more efficient than the Minister of Defense. So there is this internal political dimension on the Russian side to that. And because of that, they are putting all forces available in Bakhmut, and that is why it's very difficult for Ukrainian forces to hold to the town at this point.
And I was just reading about the 29-year-old medic, the paramedic, who was photographed in action in Bakhmut, and days later she lost her life. Talk to us about the impact of this war on the women of Ukraine.
Well, the impact is immense, like on men as well. But I think it's slightly different for women. And it's actually a bit of diverging ways in how this war affected women. Because on the one hand, of course, multiples of women, millions of women have been kind of streamlined into various stereotypical roles of mothers, where they had to take their kids, grab them, and move out of the country, or if they stay inside the country, taking care of their kids became kind of their major job because their partners have left for the front line. So on the one hand, there was this streamlining them in those stereotypical women's roles. But on the other hand, the truth is that also many women joined Ukrainian armed forces. We have over 50,000 women who are currently fighting in the armed forces of Ukraine, and they're gaining recognition. So now when we talk about our defenders in Ukrainian language, like for instance in French, there are different noun forms for male and female professions. So now when we talk about our defenders, we use both female and male nouns, so to speak, for defender in Ukrainian, to signify that we recognize that there are also Ukrainian women who are actually fighting in this war, be it as directly as fighters or as military medics in whatever role they choose to do. But in that sense, they kind of breaking those stereotypes and showing that they can do different things, not just being mothers, but also being fighters, being soldiers, doing other things. So in that sense, of course, that's a bit of a different way in how lives of Ukrainian women have changed. And then there is the third element, third dimension to that, and that is, of course, women who became direct victims of Russian aggression, women who have been killed, women who have been raped, women who have been deported to Russia, those who have been separated from their families, those who have been separated from their children. That's another dimension in how women's lives have changed, of course, and that is a very heartbreaking, that probably the most heartbreaking group of women. It's very difficult to even find words on how to express all feelings, but I know for sure that we have to recognize their sacrifice and what they have gone through, and try to remember this sacrifice they made.
Absolutely. And interestingly, Russia's war against Ukraine has also galvanized support for LGBTQ rights. You're one of a number of lawmakers who has not only supported legislation to prohibit hate speech against that community, but also introduced legislation to give partnership rights to same-sex couples. What can you tell us?
Yes, indeed. It was yesterday that I introduced a bill to the parliament, and I'm now talking to other MPs to co-sponsor this bill. And the bill was basically allow for same-sex couples to register their partnerships, which is for me is a basic human right. We shouldn't tell other people whom to love and how to organize their lives. But it's particularly important at this point of time because we do have LGBT people fighting in the army, and them not being able to register relations with their partner has very dire and direct consequences. In case something happens to LGBT man or woman in the front line, and they need medical help, for instance, their partner would not be able to make medical decisions instead of him or her because that would not be legally possible. So we need to make sure that those who are protecting us are protected by our society and by our legislation. And that is the major driving force why we're introducing this legislation now, because those who are on the front line need this protection. And that is why I hope the lawmakers will understand this. And despite there are conservative elements in the society, majority, 56% of Ukrainians actually support this type of legislation. And I hope that this will equally be supported by the Ukrainian parliament.
And this is exactly the opposite of what the Russian President Putin would want. Ina Sovsen, thanks so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. We wish you all the best.
Thank you so much.